Hello, so today we're going to talk a little bit about the quince fruit, and I want to just try to give you a tiny bit of background on history and origins, cultivation, and harvest as a prelude to what you're going to hear with Brooks about processing and turning the fruit of this tree into all sorts of different delicious edible products. Quinces have a fairly wide geographic range of origin. Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Azerbaijan, sweeping eastward from Turkey is their place of origin. At present, for commercial cultivation, they're grown most extensively in Turkey and in China, but they are grown on a smaller scale throughout Europe, many places in South America, even in Mexico. They are also grown throughout the Middle East. They are a deciduous tree, closely related to apples, pears, plums, peaches. They're in the Rosaceae family, the family that gives us so many delicious fruits. All of those, plus strawberries, blackberries, raspberries, and many more. So another thing I should mention is that the quince is a very cold hardy tree. They can grow quite successfully with no frost damage down to about 15 degrees. And in the spring when they flower, they can be frost hardy to 25 degrees or so Fahrenheit. So not a lot of worry about frost damage when your blossoms are happening. We like the quince here because it's a little bit of an atypical fruit that is mostly used as a crop that you would harvest and then cook to eat. Though there are some varieties like this one here, which is from one of our other trees over here. This is a variety called Aromatnaya, and it is one that actually can be eaten fresh. Usually the flesh is very firm, crunchy, and a bit on the tart, sort of floral tart side. This particular one is one that you can cook and process, but is also eaten fresh. And when it's eaten fresh, what is most commonly done, for example, in Chile, what they do is they'll take the fruit and bang it on a rock. And in the process of kind of banging all of the sides on a rock, you start to release the oil content in the cells and some of the moisture in the cells that then really gives you a much bigger flavor experience. And then slice pieces and then lightly salt them, and you get this kind of savory, floral, salty combination as a fresh fruit. That's atypical, though. More commonly, and as you'll see with Brooks, they are processed and used especially to make Membrillo, which is basically a quince paste. It's a gorgeous, deep burgundy sort of color. It's often made into jams. When I've made jam in the past, typically I don't get quite as deep and rich of a color, but usually more in the kind of rusty reddish brown color, but really incredible floral flavor throughout, and nice and sweet. Great on yogurt, great in cereal and on toasts. And one other use that I should mention is that very commonly in apple pie recipes, you will see the recipe call for specific apple varieties, but also the addition of a small percentage of quince, maybe like one quince in a whole pie, because the quince itself, it holds up really well to cooking, and it imparts that floral character, that floral aroma will really be imparted and radiate throughout your pies, so that can be a really nice addition. And one of the other things that people really like about the quince is the fruit at full ripeness has an incredible floral aroma, almost a rose-like, sort of musky rose-like flavor. And a couple of fruit on your kitchen counter can perfume your whole kitchen, or, if you live in a small house, even a small house for several weeks from the aroma that's emanating from them. A really delicious fruit in that regard. At maturity, they'll go from this greenish hue to a much deeper sort of yellow. You can see on this fruit kind of green on one side that wasn't getting the sun, and yellow on the other. But yeah, a nice bright golden yellow. They also have a really fuzzy, almost peach-like texture. When mature, that fuzz just basically rubs right off when you're handling and processing them. You'll see the fuzz rub right off, and if wash it underwater, it certainly comes off quite readily. I'm not going to bother to salt them, but you can see kind of a golden yellow flesh and really dry and crispy texture, but really, really floral. I think they're quite delicious. One thing to know about growing this fruit, the trees come into bearing usually within 2-3 years after first being planted. They tend to take a multi-trunk sort of habit. If you want a single trunk, more tree-like habit, you really have to work with that in your early pruning. By and large, they are self-fertile, so if you only had a single tree, you would still get a good fruit set. But if you have multiple trees and or multiple varieties, with pollination from the bees, you'll get a little bit higher production because you get enhanced pollination. But even just a single tree can be a very, very productive crop for you. So not something you see super commonly, but at this time of year, starting in October or so, in some specialty markets, some farmers market type settings, you will start to see the quinces appear. And great crop for all sorts of reasons. Really, really delicious.
All right. So I'm Brooke Schmitt with the Cowell Coffee Shop, and today I'm going to talk to you about quinces. So this is a very unusual fruit that we're fortunate to have lots of at Caspis. It's a member of the Cydonia family, and it's actually the only member of the Cydonia species or our family. And then it's related loosely to apples and pears, but it's very different in one key way. All of the species that we have that grow here in the United States are extremely woody and astringent. There are a couple species that are known to grow in the Middle East that can be eaten out of hand, but these definitely cannot. They're extremely woody, astringent, and full of tannins, which is what makes your mouth pucker. So in order to process these, we need to break down the tannins that are inside of them. So the first thing we do is peel the quince. So what that does is it removes the skin and makes it easier for it to break down when we boil it. So we're gonna peel it, we're gonna chop it away from its core where it has the seed pod in the middle. Then we're gonna just chop it up into loose pieces that are about equal size so that they break down at an even rate. Then we're gonna put it into some water with lemon zest, and we're gonna boil it for 60 to 90 minutes until it's fork tender. You wanna think mashed potatoes here. From there, we put it through a food mill or a food processor, puree it. We take that puree and we put it back on the stove and bring it up to a simmer. When it's up to a simmer, we add sugar and lemon juice. The reason we do this is for preservation purposes and because of anthocyanins. Anthocyanins are a pigment compound that's locked up inside of the tannin. And the tannin, when it breaks down, releases the anthocyanins, but it needs acidity to stabilize. Anthocyanins are responsible for the pigments in most fruits. So when you see the red blush of an apple on the skin or red cabbage, all of that is anthocyanins. But because it's locked up here, we have to break down all of the compounds inside of the quince before we can get at those. When we start out, we're looking at white fruit that's oxidating fairly quickly. But it still boils to a yellowish pale puree. And then over the course of 90 to 180 minutes of boiling at a low simmer, it slowly turns ruby red and pink. Comes together, loses a lot of its moisture. We further evaporate it in a dehydrator, and then it gelatinizes into what we have today, which is beautiful Membrillo and quince paste, prized amongst the northern Spaniards and served with manchego cheese and crackers. Can also be used in sandwiches, it can be used in dressings, and it can be used as a garnish or a wipe or smear on a plate in kind of highfalutin cooking where you're putting down a beautiful piece of fish or red meat. The other thing you can do with quinces is you can make quince vinegar or shrubs, which involves a similar process of boiling them, breaking them down, and then introducing vinegar and sugar and letting them ferment. The big thing that you have to remember about quinces is that if you don't break down the tannins, they're inedible. So I find these to be a very fascinating fruit and a great example of something that needs to be processed in order to be preserved, but has a long-lasting and rich life after the fact. So that is the Cydonia, the quince, an ugly but delicious fruit. that we're very fortunate to have from our friends at the farm.